Hi, David Burkett here, convener of SNP Peterhead. There are many reasons that a significant amount of us Scots want our country to be independent. But you may find it difficult to imagine that the Jeffrey Epstein Ghislaine Maxwell controversy is one of them. After all, Epstein was American. The grooming and abuse largely happened in the USA and abroad. Ghislaine Maxwell has British-French dual nationality. But this case, or perhaps more precisely its aftermath, offer a perfect illustration of what's really broken about Britain. To fully explore this, it's necessary to look at the parallels and differences between two quite similar cases. The Jeffrey Epstein abuse trafficking case and the Rotherham child exploitation scandal. Firstly, the parallels. Underage girls were groomed by people with power over them. They were plied with alcohol. They were sexually abused, and this was happening in plain sight. Now the differences. Epstein's victims were not from poor backgrounds. The Rotherham victims were among the most vulnerable in society. Epstein was a financier, where the Rotherham abusers were generally kebab shop owners and minicab drivers. Epstein was white. The Rotherham abusers were not. Epstein's victims were conveyed around in limos and private jets. The Rotherham victims were generally picked up in minicabs. The limos and private jets took Epstein's victims to plush apartments and private islands. The Rotherham victims were generally abused in dingy flats above takeaways. The Epstein victims had a sizable estate to sue. The Rotherham victims did not. Most importantly, Epstein had powerful friends. The Rotherham abusers didn't. The similarities in the case are stark. Power, abuse, alcohol, and awareness. But the differences generally relate to wealth, race, and the venues in which the abuse occurred. In both cases, none of these things should ever have happened. Both sets of victims should be in all our thoughts. But dealing with the aftermath of the Epstein suicide and now the Maxwell conviction, the main difference is in how these events have been covered, is that Epstein had powerful friends and the Rotherham abusers didn't. Now the worst offender in this case is The Spectator magazine. There have been a few recent articles, one of which was written by Rachel Johnson, Boris's sister. She thinks we should feel sorry for Ghislaine Maxwell. And her basis for this assertion? Well, it's briefly knowing Ghislaine at Oxford and attending a party with her in their youth. Basically, because Rachel Johnson and Ghislaine Maxwell flew in the same social circles, Rachel thinks we should all feel sorry for her. But if Rachel Johnson had spent any of her formative years in the care system in Rotherham, being picked up in minicabs and taken to dingy flats, I don't think she would feel sorry for the Rotherham abusers. And I certainly don't think The Spectator would allow her a platform to tell that story. Moving on to Ghislaine's brother, Ian Maxwell, also writing in The Spectator. Now, I don't blame him for being loyal to his sister and trying to tell us all about her good qualities. I also don't blame him for straining every sinew he has to minimise the impact on his family and maybe even get his sister out of jail someday. But can you imagine the uproar if The Spectator magazine had reached out to any of the siblings of the Rotherham abusers and asked them to write a column about their siblings' good qualities? But we're supposed to believe that platforming Ian Maxwell is somehow okay. This was, of course, later repeated by Sky News and the BBC. But perhaps the most glaring difference is from the UK government. Many of the Rotherham abusers had second nationalities, and they deservedly had their UK citizenship revoked and will be deported when they're released. Shamima Begum had her UK citizenship revoked, despite not quite having a second nationality. But has anyone in any position of power or influence in the UK government even mentioned revoking Ghislaine Maxwell's UK citizenship. Oh, of course not. You see, folks, there are generally thought to be three classes of people: upper, middle and working class. But a fourth class has also always existed: the ruling class. Now, the ruling class is generally comprised of politicians, the media, the wealthy, the nobility and the monarchy. Middle and working class people generally have little sympathy for people like Epstein or the Rotherham abusers. The ruling class would have little sympathy for people like the Rotherham abusers. But throughout history we have seen that the people the ruling classes have most sympathy and concern for is, of course, each other, no matter what they've done. If Jeffrey Epstein ran a kebab shop and Ghislaine Maxwell drove a minicab conveying vulnerable girls to a dingy flat above his kebab shop so that he could ply them with alcohol and abuse them, they'd have had the book thrown at them already. No Prime Minister's sisters would be defending them, the media would not provide their siblings with a platform to defend them, and their citizenship would have been revoked already. The Owen Paterson scandal, Downing Street parties, Boris Johnson's flat refurbishment, Cummingsgate, and more seriously this case all show us that the British ruling class and its loyalty only to itself is alive and well. It is in rude good health and shows no sign of ever being smashed. Billy Connolly says it better than I do.
More people should listen to comedians, and fewer people should listen to politicians. Should listen to comedians and poets. They're telling the truth.
So any politicians in particular that you think that we should be ignoring at the moment?
Boris. Anybody who listens to Boris needs professional help.
Because?
Because he's a big silly toff. And Britain's been listening to big silly toffs for years. And it's time they listen to themselves and go on with it.
But this is bigger than Boris or the Tories. And getting rid of either Johnson or his party isn't a solution. Because even the leaders of the two main UK-wide opposition parties are knights of the realm. If we stay with the United Kingdom, we are doomed to be eternally being under the boot of this ruling class of big silly toffs. Independence gives us a chance to start with a clean slate, breaking up the UK ruling class into its component parts, perhaps abolishing the monarchy, hereditary privilege, and reviewing our relationship with the monarchy. Because if we're being honest, folks, the real reason the media are platforming Ghislaine Maxwell's defenders is plain for all to see. The UK ruling class represents the very worst of Britain. It's rotten and corrupt to its core. So rotten, they're even attempting to defend Ghislaine Maxwell. Let's get free of it. Let's start with a clean slate. Let's be independent. Cheers.